Hey, folks. Welcome in. Happy Friday. Happy spring. Hope you got something good planned for this weekend. It's good to imagine your face there. We can't see you, but you guys can see us. We're in for a treat today in the presence of a man named Kim Marshall. I'm going to shut up soon, and he's going to lead us through this hour session today. Kim, welcome. And Corey, thanks for having us and bringing us here together through Rocket PD.
Yeah, well, thank you guys for being here. I was telling Kim before that we got on. Some of you may be familiar with the Rethinking Teacher Supervision and Evaluation cohort that we do. We are in our fifth year with Kim doing this program, and I think we saw the last number was 2,500 or so educators have gone through that program. And one of the things that we've been talking a lot about in the course of that time is how do we move away from teacher evaluation as a largely compliance-based exercise and get to the heart of it, which is the true coaching person to person that happens in the classroom. How do we find more time for that? How do we make that time more valuable? And how do we give teachers and really administrators the confidence that they need to be successful? And so I'm so happy to have Kim here today. Kim, it's great to see you. We're looking forward to continuing this work. I know as we've talked about different things that are happening in the space, one of the things we've talked about is technology and how that can potentially be an enabler in different ways. And so we'll hear a little bit about that today. But I'll pull back and just we'll let you and Kim run with it. Happy to have everyone and hope you find today's session very useful.
Thanks, Corey. Appreciate it. Kim, how's it going?
Very good. Good to be here.
Heard you got a presentation for us today.
I do indeed. Guys, so I want 6 hours, but I don't think we have 6 hours, right? So we're gonna limit this to 1 hour.
Unfortunately not.
I don't know, they might stay
Unfortunately not.
on.
I would for Kim Marshall, but I think we're up here at three. Kim, before we jump in, for anyone who might not know who you are, which I'm gonna guess is not many of the people who are here at this webinar today, what's the Marshall Memo
So
and what
weekly.
inspired you to create it?
Okay. Well, so when I was a teacher, I struggled to keep up with the reading, a Boston sixth grade teacher. When I finally became a principal, I had even more trouble staying up with the reading. But when I finished being a principal in 2002, I realized, oh my gosh, I have time. So I had this idea of launching a weekly newsletter that would summarize the best ideas from the world about education. And I launched it, and I'm now in my 21st year every week, with a couple of weeks off in the summer of writing summaries of 8 or 9 articles that I've gleaned from about 150 articles that I read or skimmed over the weekend. So that's what the Marshall Memo is, and a lot of people appreciate the fact that I am their designated reader. Finding the really good stuff that's out there.
I love that. By that account, you created the Marshall Memo 2 years after I was born.
My goodness. Okay.
Kim, I also understand you've written a book. What's the book
Correct.
about?
Yeah, because one of my obsessions as a teacher and a principal was teacher evaluation. And as a principal, after a few years of using the old system, I stumbled upon what seemed to be a better way for teachers and for me of short, informal visits with face-to-face coaching conversations. And I wrote an article about it, and then I wrote a book about it, and it's now in its third edition. So yes, that is sort of my big passion is how to improve this system that people are so down on and so cynical on.
Mm, mm. At Swiftscore, every day we're having tons and tons of conversations with different instructional leaders.
Well, not tons and tons, a couple a day. I mean, you got to spread it out because principals are super busy and teachers are busy too.
Mm, mm. When we talk to folks, people know the Marshall framework, the Marshall way of doing things. A couple weeks back, you and I were at Dudley Charlton. You gave a presentation. I just was amazing to see the principals in that room excited, doing evaluation in a way that builds relationships. My understanding, you got a similar presentation here for us today.
Well, yeah, short and sweet. So you want to jump right into it?
Let's jump into it, please.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here and Hopefully you will see my immaculate desktop here. And can you see these okay? Are we good? Okay, great. So here is the sort of a good quote on this sort of the bigger issue of teacher evaluation, supervision, and teaching in general. I'll let you read this. So anyone who's been a teacher, anyone who's been a principal, superintendent, parent knows that this is the truth. There's variability in schools. And what happened to my screen here? I clicked it and oh, I unshared my screen by accident. Good grief. Now, so I'm trying to share my screen now. Click share, and I'm seeing you. So are you seeing my screen now?
I can see your screen.
So I'm seeing you. So why is that? That's interesting. Okay. So you can see it now? Okay. So
You're good.
variability. So you see this? Okay. Good.
Yes.
Okay, so here's variability writ large. The entire state of New York, every school in New York that has a sixth grade, so it could be a middle school or a K to 8 school, and the horizontal axis is poverty. So this is the rich end, this is the poor end, excuse me, the rich end, poor end, and this is student achievement on a sixth grade math test. So this is very low achievement, and this is 100% achievement. So what you see is tremendous variability. So for example, this school right here has about 60% free and reduced price lunch and about 50% proficiency on this pretty hard sixth grade math test. This is pre-Common Core. And the general trend is the poorer the child, the worse they do. So that's the line of best fit. And what intrigues people looking at this, and we could talk about this for a while, is who are these schools up in the top there, especially in the top right-hand corner, who are beating the economic odds here and who are getting high achievement in spite of poverty and all kinds of disadvantages. So that's what's always fascinated me. That's what got me out of the classroom into the principal's office, and it was got me to be a thinker about effective teaching in schools. And the school in the very top right-hand corner there is a school in Troy, New York, where Doug Lemov found phenomenal achievement in a very high poverty school. And he went in there and looked at it, and it was all about good teaching and good school leadership taken to a very high level. So the gurus of this are Ron Edmonds, who I studied with way back in the 1980s. Karen Chenoweth is the current sort of guru on effective schools, beat the odds schools. And I just mentioned Doug Lemov, who's done a lot of work going into classrooms and noticing and documenting the specific things that effective teachers are doing in those beat the odds schools. So it happens that we have an update on this. So there's an article in 74 a little while ago, and I'm just going to scroll down here, and you'll have all these slides here. So here is California, but can we just have somebody, in the Q&A, just call out a state so we can look at a state. Maybe we'll look at California, but we want to look at a state and just look at what's going on here with a very similar scatter plot. Can someone call out or type in a state?
I'm seeing Nicole for New Jersey.
New Jersey. Okay, I was just in New Jersey yesterday. So we're going to look at New Jersey. So let's look at New Jersey. So here's the scatter plot for New Jersey. And with every one of these schools, we can hover over the school. So for example, this beat the odds school right here is in Atlantic City. And the school is, do we see the name of it? Yeah, Richmond Avenue School in Atlantic City. So that's the school that's extraordinarily effective, beating the odds, the general trend, which is across the state of New Jersey. Here's another school. Okay, this is the College Achieve Patterson. That's in Patterson. That's a charter school. They're not all charter schools. So anyway, you can look at this at your leisure. But what this does, this is what you call a proof of concept. Okay, so it can be done, and schools all over the country are doing it. They are beating the odds, and the magic formula is really good teaching and really good school leadership. So the mantra has got to be more good teaching in more classrooms more of the time. Yeah, but how do we do that? Everyone wants that, but how do we do that? Well, we do it by here are some theories. People have been thinking about this issue. Hire good teachers and leave them alone. That's one theory of action. Here's another one. Double down on the traditional teacher evaluation process, by which we mean get into classrooms, write down everything, grade notes, have a pre-conference, a post-conference, all that kind of stuff. Rubric score lessons. That's what they do in New York City. Rubrics go in with a Danielson rubric and score every lesson on the 4-3-2-1 scale. Inspecting lesson plans is a bright idea. And artifacts. My daughter is a Boston teacher, has to upload all kinds of artifacts to a website to get for her evaluation. Looking at videos of teachers, that's another idea. Surprise video, bringing in a camera so you see what's really going on day by day. coming in and interrupting instruction with a demonstration of how it should be done in front of the kids. Anonymous surveys. Pittsburgh uses 15% of the evaluation in Pittsburgh is an anonymous survey by the kids to try by the tripod thing. Artificial intelligence. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on, but you can actually do text to data transcriptions of lessons and have it come up with an evaluation. And then there's value add, using test scores, kids' test scores to evaluate teachers. So in my humble opinion, all of these are ineffective practices. None of these are ways that really improve teaching and learning. They're all compliance oriented or they're simply wrong-headed approaches. We can discuss that some more if you want. So here's four hard truths that have come out of my experience as a teacher, a principal, and then the research I've been doing for the Marshall Memo over the last 21 years. Guess what? There's variability in every school. Kids learn more from some teachers than from others. And it's not because they're magicians, it's because of specific practices that they bring in day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. And this is one of the best books about it. We saw Doug Lamotte's picture a minute ago, Teach Like a Champion. This is the third edition. And by the way, if you don't have the third edition, it's really fantastic. And this talks about specific techniques. Okay. The second thing is variability. You saw Dylan William a minute ago, one of my heroes. So every single school of every type has some kind of bell-shaped curve going on. If we're thinking about a 4-point teacher evaluation scale, and it bends one way or the other depending on the school. Okay. Then there's the moral dimension, which is that vulnerable students who walk into school with any kind of disadvantage, especially need good teaching. Michael Fullan calls that the equity hypothesis. So what it means is that those top two levels of teaching, the effective and the highly effective, disproportionately benefit kids who walk into school vulnerable with disabilities, with with poverty, with gunshots in the night, with a sister who was hurt in a car crash, whatever it is that's on their mind. And conversely, less effective teaching pulls those kids down disproportionately. So this is the moral dimension. And let's talk about a specific mediocre teaching practice, what I call the Kapwaka syndrome, calling on students, calling on people who already know the answer. So only calling on the bright sparks who raise their hand, the verbal kids, the fast processors. So that disadvantages the kids who are not so sure, who are less confident, and they fall further behind. So that's just a mediocre practice that widens achievement gaps. So this is what gets me so fired up about this, is a moral imperative. And the fourth thing is the traditional teacher evaluation process that we have been using in the United States now for about 70 years. And here's what it looks like. The pre-observation conference, sit with the teacher, go over the lesson plan that's going to be observed, the actual lesson observation, taking detailed notes, okay, not on a computer nowadays, analyzing and writing that up, and in some cases producing evidence for all the claims, and then a post-observation conference. That single evaluation takes 4 hours. And the research shows, and again I see confirmation that this does not make any difference to teaching and learning. So why is this time-consuming process so ineffective? Well, first of all, if you're going to spend 4 hours with one teacher, it's not going to happen more than once a year, okay, or twice maybe. The teacher knows you're coming, so they put most of the time, so they put on their best lesson, which may or may not be representative of what they do the rest of the year. Okay. It's too much information for a teacher to digest, getting this very, very detailed report. Okay. It's no way to coach anybody. It's judgment oriented rather than coaching oriented. So once again, it's not going to really sink in as much. Often there's an excruciating wait to get the feedback from the teacher. It might be 2 weeks in my daughter's case sometimes. And often it's done at the last minute in May, just before the deadline. So it's too late in the year to make much of a difference to the teaching the kids are getting the rest of the time. So no wonder this time-honored process is so incredibly ineffective, and why it breeds so much cynicism among teachers and administrators. And the result is that a lot of those mediocre and ineffective teaching practices are happening on a day-by-day basis. And who do they affect the most? Who do they harm the most? Well, we know that. So here are the 600 lessons that a teacher teaches every year. If you figure about 5 lessons a day, 180 days in the school year, that's, 900 lessons. Okay. And if you're only inspecting one or two of those and writing those up in great detail, we can just see visually here what a really ridiculous process this is. That this would improve teaching, that it would even accurately describe teaching, that it would help. And yet it's taking, about 17 full days of an administrator's time to do this kind of work with teachers. So a administrator in New York on Long Island pulled me aside a few years ago in a break during a workshop and said, every time I do one of these, it takes me out of the game for 4 hours. So just look at this. There's your problem, says the coach. And so we are really playing the wrong game in terms of teacher evaluation. So can we do better? Well, let's look at if we could somehow magically evaluate every one of those 900 lessons on a 4-3-2-1 scale, where 4 is teach like a champion, level 3 is solid, those are the green ones. 2 is mediocre teaching practices, like the Kapowaka syndrome, and 1 is total meltdown. Kid threw up and everything went right out the window. So this is a actually very good teacher. In fact, this might be as good as it gets because everyone has bad moments occasionally. So how does the administrator know, you know, the real truth about this teacher, which is day by day, they're bringing in really good practices. Here's a really solid teacher. Okay, most of the time, nothing wrong with level 3 on any kind of good rubric. Occasional bad moments, but how do we get a good picture of this, from all these lessons? Because the principal is hardly getting out of their office. So how are they going to do that? So the name of the game with these two kinds of teachers is noticing and naming what's working, getting in there and coaching and noticing and encouraging, and maybe even getting better than they are already. So here are the mediocre practices. And the Kapowaka syndrome is one of the more benign ones, boring lessons, kind of that scene from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Bueller, man answering his own questions, boring the kids, and this, again, disproportionately harms kids who have disadvantages. And there he is. There's Ben Stein, and there's the Kapowaka syndrome. But here are some other things. Too much teacher talk. The do now, which is supposed to last 5 minutes at the beginning of the lesson, becomes the do forever. Repeating students' answers, word search puzzles, just a smattering of some of the mediocre, not bad, but just mediocre teaching practices. And again, these are flying under the radar if principals are not in classrooms a lot, or assistant principals or instructional coaches. Now, here's really bad teaching. This is educational malpractice. This is, most of the time. And look at the honeymoon at the beginning of the year. You see that honeymoon? But doesn't last long, and things really go south. And there's a lot of bullying and a lot of shouting at kids, and just a lot of, just evil kind of climate in this classroom, which is incredibly harmful, especially for kids, with vulnerabilities. So an eighth grade girl whispered this to her principal when the principal walked into the class in a school in Long Island. "Get me out of here," said this girl to her principal, because she just was agonized at what was going on. So nothing undermines the motivation of hardworking teachers more than poor performance in other teachers being ignored over long periods of time. Not only do poor performing teachers negatively affect the students in their classes, but they also have a spillover effect, poisoning the overall climate of the school. So I can hear an amen to that one, because many of you have been there and have seen this in action. So there's all this talk about wanting more great teachers. And we see Robin Williams in Dead Poet Society, and we see Sidney Poitier and To Sir with Love, and Aaron Grunwald in Freedom Teachers, and then Jaime Escalante, that's him on the right. On the left is the actor who played him in an amazing movie about the Los Angeles school that produced, where the kids knocked the top off the calculus AP test. And so the politicians like this rhetoric, let's have more great teachers. But let's face it, we got a bell-shaped curve, okay? And so how much of that is there? And I say, let's talk about teaching. Let's talk about effective teaching, and not this rhetoric about great teachers. So the question is, how do you improve day-to-day practices of more and more teachers? How can we get each teacher to get a little bit better each month? There's this book, Atomic Habits, the idea of just 1% better all the time. And if we can get that to happen, then we'll get tremendous cumulative results over time. So that's where I'm coming from, is how do we gradually improve practice on a day-by-day basis? And again, you know who especially benefits from this. So what's our theory of action? How do we move the ball? How do we move the needle like 1%? How do we get these improvements going on in classrooms when there's so much teaching? These 900 lessons is kind of mind-boggling. So here's one of the great basketball coaches of all time, and I'll let you read his philosophy about gradual improvement in this case, basketball. And many of you probably know the outcome of his extraordinary coaching over decades at UCLA. And can anyone recognize the young ball player there? Anyone want to type in the Q&A who we're looking at here at the very beginning of his career? Got an answer yet?
No one up.
There it is.
Kareem.
Kareem. Well, actually, at that point
Kareem.
he was Lou Alcindor, but soon to be Kareem, and amazing life. Okay, so let's look at these four types of teachers because these all exist in schools. Maybe not the bottom right-hand corner in your school. So here we have the superstars that teach like a champion level, really bringing it in at a very high level. Here we have our solid performers. Here we have our mediocre practices, and here we have really bad. And so those are the general typologies. But most teachers are in these two categories. I would say probably 95% of teachers are either in the solid or the mediocre practices categories. I added up the numbers, by the way, there. If, like 3,600 would be a perfect score. So most teachers are there. So the principal's job and the administrative team's job is how are you going to make more progress here? So let's be very specific. Okay. So in mediocre practices, we're talking about fuzzy classroom management, not so good classroom management, checking for understanding by saying any questions, maybe a quick reminder at the beginning of the lesson, boys and girls, we're going to talk about the Pythagorean theorem today, and then moving on with the lesson, and not such great closure. So those are just not bad, but just mediocre practices. So that's the red one right here. So let's look at the same things in the effective teacher's classroom. The classroom management is tighter. The retrieval at the beginning, instead of saying just mentioning the Pythagorean theorem, the teacher says, everyone get out a piece of paper and everybody write down what you remember about the Pythagorean theorem from yesterday. So that's just by retrieving, that's a qualitatively different sort of teaching practice. The lesson goals are clearer, the explanations are crisper. When they check for understanding, there's a way of checking with every student in the class. Okay, so there's a real check for understanding, and then there's an exit tick at the end. So those are specific teaching practices that make this one here so much more effective long term than this one right here. So how do you move those people, those practices up to that effective level? Well, you do it by getting in there, noticing, and coaching. And that's what we've got to have a theory of action. We've got to have a practice that actually does that. And of course, we want to take these people, if we can rescue them and rescue those kids, we want to move those up and gradually move them up. And how about moving these people up, yeah, to the highly effective level? This is what's got to happen on a regular basis. So how do we do this? Well, my theory that I developed as a principal and other people have thought of the same basic idea is short, frequent, systematic visits, sampling the 900 lessons, seeing what really is going on in classrooms. Each one of those short visits followed by a face-to-face coaching conversation, okay? A brief narrative write-up of that, and maybe there's a way that AI might help us there. We'll get to that. Certainly surveying the students at a low stakes level, hearing from the kids, including that girl who whispered to her principal, get me out of here. Orchestrating a course teacher teamwork, that's where some of the best work goes on. Making student learning central, but not test scores, looking at learning on a day-by-day basis. Like you just taught this lesson, how did it go? Look at the exit ticket, look at the quiz. Let's see if it can be improved. Keeping the whole process medium stakes. That's one of the key things here. And then using a rubric, because we have some good rubrics out there to set goals at the beginning of the year. So each teacher sets goals. And then at the end of the year, pulling all these impressions and points of contact together into a final rubric evaluation at the end of the year. So that's a one slide summary of what I've been working on, for these sort of 25 years. And here are 7 books on the same basic idea. Mine is the green one. The original one was the 3-minute classroom walkthrough by Carolyn Downey and Company. There's Paul Bamrick Santoyo's book, Leverage Leadership. There's Now We're Talking, which is a former Seattle principal, and 3 other books sort of around coaching. So there's a lot of writing and thinking about this. There's differences between these, but the same basic idea, frequent visits, face-to-face, and a coaching orientation. So here's the basic outline, and then I want to show a quick video to sort of make this vivid, and then I want to talk about the AI idea, which is why Will Krasnow is here and why we're working together on this one. So we got to sample daily reality. We got to see what's really going on. We got to be a good observer. Principals and others have got to have a good set of eyes on them and good judgment, and then we have to connect to the teacher. So basically, to sample, frequent, short, systematic, and unannounced. Those are the key characteristics. And if we had 6 hours, I would go into each one of these in detail. Being a good observer, humble, curious, and low tech. So I am an advocate of not bringing laptops and tablets into a classroom. Really smelling the roses, getting around, talking to the kids. perceptive and focusing on one leverage point at a time, one coaching point at a time, not trying to do the 6 or 7 things. And then, of course, stepping back and getting the bigger picture of what's going on in this class, this unit, this teacher's life, this teacher's goals, and so forth. And then for the connecting to the teacher, the face-to-face conversation every single time, okay, before anything else is written up, okay, before anything is sent electronically or any evaluation is done, a brief follow-up summary of the conversation, having the courage, of course, to step up when things are really not going well, those mediocre practices and those ineffective practices, and then scoring it all at the end of the year. So again, this is the sort of overall outline. Now, teachers do not fall in love with many observations at first blush. In fact, they will come up with objections, usually 11. And so anytime I'm working with a group of teachers or administrators, I always have teachers brainstorm about what would worry you about short, frequent, unannounced classroom visits. And they come up with stuff. And one of them is, this is a gotcha. Very, very common reaction to this. And there are lots of other worries about this, even from confident teachers. So how can we make this better? Well, first of all, we got to get those out on the table and acknowledge them. And then we got to think about, like, how can we convince teachers? So I used to be a union rep when I was a teacher at the Martin Luther King School in Boston in the 1970s. And so from a union point of view, or from anyone who really wants to think this through from a teacher point of view, here are some considerations that I would push. First of all, I would want to know, why are we doing this? What's wrong with the old system? I've been doing fine. I get a satisfactory rating every year. I don't really worry about it too much, and I'm fine. So why are we doing this? So we have to explain the rationale. There had to be multiple visits. It can't be 3. So how many should it be? I actually push for 1 a month, like 10. Face-to-face conversation. As a union rep, I would absolutely insist on that, because if you're in my classroom for a short visit, you've got to talk to me. I mean, I've got to be able to explain the context and what's going on here. You got to stay long enough. So I don't think 3 minutes. Remember the 3-minute walkthrough book. I don't think 3 minutes is long enough. So how long is long enough? I think around 10, 15 minutes. Systematically spread through the year. Absolutely. Very, very important. Skipping ahead here. Sorry. Not intrusive, because one of the objections is it throws the kids off. It distracts the kids. What are you looking for as an administrator? We need to talk about that. What are your criteria? You've got to have a good eye, which means your boss needs to supervise you. We have to know what the bigger picture is, again, with the lesson, with the union, with the unit, with my life as a professional. Certainly, we would want to do an anonymous poll of teachers to see how this thing is going. And we would need teacher evaluation, teacher input for the final end of the year evaluation, and fair notice if there's a problem. So those are sort of the things that I would insist on as a union rep. So I have a few sort of snapshots here of what this might look like, what mini observations might look like in different classrooms. Very important to know what the kids are actually working on, what the instructional task is, its level of rigor, its relevance, then really getting close enough to see what the kids are doing and saying. Jotting notes, again, by hand, keeping it low tech about what kids are talking about with groups, what the teacher's talking about. Sitting down and actually working with a kid is a very good practice, for getting a sense of what kids are finding difficult, what they're successful at. And then really showing delight, because the teacher is watching you out of the corner of their eye. And so yawning would not be a good thing to do. Getting down with the kids, very important. And then if the teacher's not addressing the class, actually, zeroing in on a couple of kids and asking questions like, what are you learning today? And why is this important? Why does the Renaissance, matter? And how will you know when you know it? How is your teacher going to know, that you understand what she's been teaching? So this is the optics of a thing, not sitting at the back of the room typing away. Okay, so we're going to watch a brief video of Becky O'Brien, who's a teacher in a gifted class in the South. And what we want to do with this is, because you really need to simulate this anytime we do this. What we want to do is to get a sense of what we can see in a short period of time and the kind of conclusions we might draw. So let's just watch this probably about 8 minutes of this teacher in action here with her gifted grade 4-5 class.
My parents were sad, but my brothers and I were overjoyed. I couldn't wait to get away from that awful street and those mean people who, no matter what we did or what we didn't do, they were always there, ready to hurt us.
But I don't think the neighbors and stuff have no right to just mess with them and try to hurt them and stuff. I don't think that's right. They're acting like they're all Mr. Perfect or Lady Perfect or whatever you want to call it. Is like the girls would play with her at first until their parents got with them, and then they thought, well, I'm all perfect because I do all this and I have friends. But then they just want to pick on her and their family just because of their race and color of their family and because of their Puerto Rican.
I don't think they should have gave that parents should have gave anybody a second chance because I mean, if you should they should have moved out right away. If they felt that they were unwanted, they shouldn't have stayed there in the first place. And I don't think they should be in any more harm if they don't want to get hurt. I don't think they should stay there. I think they should have moved out at the very beginning. Yeah, it's like a crime to the people in that neighborhood that they can't live in there because they're from Puerto Rico or they're from a different country or between race or color. And I believe, Ashley, if they did feel that they were unwanted, then they should have left because they just made it worse than it.
I think it was kind of stupid of the mother to like give them a second chance because like if they beat your children up or something, you shouldn't stay there and let some more of your children get beat up or yourself. Like when she had the water poured on her. I mean, that was kind of stupid of her to just stay there.
But it was her right. It doesn't matter if I mean somebody could beat them up and that's still if they still have the right to live there. They shouldn't have to be forced out of their house. It shouldn't be like that because they want to live in a place even though they were hurting their kids. I know that was bad, but they shouldn't have to leave just because other people couldn't accept them.
They should I don't think that the kids wanted to beat her up because first they were all playing and stuff until their parents caught them on the steps and stuff and told them and what they were whispering. And as that, I think that the parents told them to do that.
I bet the parents would have never stepped in. I bet the kids still be playing. Lita would feel a lot better in the neighborhood because she knew a lot of kids and everything. Yeah, I think that too because they were all playing and having a lot of fun and they didn't think anything of it. And people in the group were saying that Felita was really good and stuff. And then all of a sudden the parents came out and made them go over there and that's maybe the reason why they were whispering about it and stuff. Parents were the ones.
I've heard someone said this on TV. They're talking about race discrimination, and this person said that you could put 5 kids, all different races, in a sandbox, and they could play forever and live together happily. And when somebody comes along and tells them that they're different and they shouldn't hang around each other, they'll just separate, not talk to each other anymore. People can live together as long as somebody's not teaching them that that's wrong.
I agree with Ashley, what she said a minute ago. I mean, they have every right to live where they want to live, no matter what race they are, and that was very unfair what they did, and nobody should be hurt for having rights, and I mean, it was wrong, and I mean, there's no black people that live on my street now because there were people that were very prejudiced in my neighborhood. So there used to be a black family that lived there, and they moved away. And I'm not prejudiced against people, you know, and everyone has rights. But I mean, it's just not right that there's no there's no black people that live in our neighborhood anymore because they were run out.
Yeah, I agree with Lauren, but like when you're saying they have every right to live there, I think they have every right to live there, but they shouldn't really stay because everybody's getting beaten up. And what is it to hurt somebody than to live in a house than to go back to their old life and not be hurt?
I don't think they should have to be chased away. I don't think it's fair. I mean, what the people that are doing this stuff to them are wanting them to move. That's what they want. And eventually, if you just keep on trying to ignore them, I mean, they'll kind of try to kill you or something. Well, you know, but they'll quit. But they have. I know. You've got to. But she's up for yourself. If you stand up for yourself and you feel that you have the right to live anywhere you want, and you feel even if your kids are getting beat up, that's not your fault, and you shouldn't have to move out because of it. Because you have the right to live wherever you want to live. Yeah. But Johnny tried to stand up and he tried to hit and everything, and he got beat up.
Okay, so at this point, the administrator, the supervisor leaves. So that's the mini observation. That's what we've seen. Okay, so what are we going to make of this? So if we had more sort of interactivity here, we would hear from you. But I want to just quickly summarize, what when I do this, and I've shown this more than once to groups of educators, people will see a lot. There's a lot to like here, right? I mean, kids having a really lively discussion without raising their hands, speaking kid to kid, not just through the teacher. The teacher is sort of letting the conversation go in a very interesting direction. Lots of very wise statements from the kids, thoughtful discussion about a sensitive topic, race. I mean, there's a lot to like here, a lot to compliment this teacher about. But the next thing with any many observation is, what don't we know? Well, we don't know why she's doing this. We don't know how this fits into the curriculum. We don't know what happened for the rest of the lesson. We came in the middle. We came in just as she had finished, the teacher had finished reading from a book. We don't know too much about that. We don't know why she did that. We don't know how it worked out after we left, because we're right in the middle part of the period. So a lot we don't know. And then what are some possible coaching points? So we can think of some things she could have done differently, clarified her learning objective, had the kids write something, write stuff on the board, slow down a little bit when that girl at the back made that wise comment about kids can get along, if the parents don't, because they moved on at the. So there's lots of possible coaching points. So usually when I discuss this with a group of people come up with like 7 or 8 possible coaching points, along with a lot of positive compliments for this teacher. And the question is, what do you do with that? Because you come out with this information, maybe you jotted a few notes, those are thoughts about it. And when you talk to the teacher, how are you going to handle that? So should you give Becky feedback on all those things? Well, probably not, because it'd be overwhelming. Should the principal interrupt during the class and fix some of the problems that the principal sees, by calling on kids, getting them to write stuff down and so forth? Should the principal leave a note on the teacher's desk? So should the principal be at the back of the room on an iPad, typing out and send an electronic message during the class? And should the principal score the teacher on the rubric for what they saw in this lesson? So you can guess what I think about all these. Yeah, not effective practices, definitely not, for a variety of reasons. So what does the principal or the supervisor do? So I think and back to Paul Bambrick's book here, because he invented this term, what is the best leverage point? And also, what's the teacher got to say about what happened? Because the teacher knows more than we do about this. So let's jump ahead here to point 7 in my 10-point outline, which is the face-to-face conversation. That's the heart of the matter here, is picturing a face-to-face conversation with Becky about this. And here's a nice quote about this. So again, this is what I feel most passionately about. And this is where a lot of supervisors are cutting corners. They're skipping this stage. They're going straight to the written feedback, to the glows and grows or whatever it is to this teacher. And you can see from the video we just watched, what a dangerous thing that is to do as an administrator. Much better to go to the teacher's classroom when the kids aren't there. This is not Becky, but this is another situation, and have a kind of informal conversation on the teacher's home turf, where we can actually talk about student work, stuff on the board, desk arrangement, all the other things that are the essence of teaching. And face-to-face conversations are so much better because they're less bureaucratic. The teacher can tell you what happened before and after. And we're going to talk, by the way, about what happened with Becky, what happened before and after. We can talk about the curriculum. We can look at student work. The essence of this is non-defensive reflection. We want the teacher to engage in non-defensive reflection and think through solutions. If the principal misunderstood what happened, the teacher needs to have an opportunity to straighten that out, to correct it politely. And we can also face-to-face with the teacher differentiate based upon the vibes we're getting from the teacher, because body language and facial expressions and tone of voice are so important. They're like 93% of communication. So teachers actually prefer this. They might not say it up front. They might say, "Oh, give me a write-up and everything, so I know what you're going to talk to me about." But teachers appreciate talking about their work. They like talking about successful practices, aha moments with kids. They like a chance to talk through their challenges, and they feel seen and appreciated with the conversation. So this is really such a strong practice here. But the standard way to handle a feedback conversation is the feedback sandwich. Okay, we start with a compliment, then we give a constructive feedback, then we go to the compliment. So Becky had a wonderful discussion with the kids, but I really couldn't see, where this was going. I really, I'm concerned about where this fits into the social studies curriculum. But the kids were really so polite to each other and they didn't raise their hands. So that kind of feedback sandwich is very typical. And once again, my disapproval of that approach. So what do we do? So this is what I'm recommending these days. And I was just actually in a school in New York City on Wednesday and a school in New Jersey on yesterday, and really working this through with administrators. And so this is the sequence. It's a quadrant. Okay, the first thing is to appreciate what was done well. So in Becky's case, I've already talked about several things that you could appreciate. The level of discussion, the politeness, the ethos, which represents clearly a lot of work that she's done up to that point in the year. I mean, this is evidence of really good organizational and culture building and trust building, procedures in the past that we didn't see, but we see the result of it here. Okay, the second thing is to give Becky a chance to talk. Now, I'm going to give you the backstory because I've seen the rest of the lesson and I know what happened. So at this point, when Becky is given a chance to talk, and by the way, here are a few sort of possible ways of of opening the door for a teacher to talk. No, and none of these are leading questions. I'll let you look at these questions.
Do you have a favorite on this list, Kim?
I'm sorry.
Do you have a favorite on this list?
Well, I'm gonna say the one that I think is the best one to ask Becky. So I'm going to pick the second one. Did you get your intended results? What worked? So now let's go back here. So now we're giving Becky a chance to talk, and the real true story with this lesson that we saw Becky. This is what really happened was the day before this observation that she was absent. Becky was out sick. And she came in and she heard that the kids had been absolutely horrible with the substitute teacher, had been mean to the substitute teacher, had almost bullied the teacher. And Becky was really upset. But her strategy was not to confront the kids directly, but to read to them from this book, Felita Blues, which is, you could gather from the discussion about bullying, in a community, sort of racially based bullying. And she read the book, she stopped and she let the discussion go, hoping that the kids would make the connection. And what we saw was what happened, which was they didn't make the connection. They just didn't get it. So a few minutes after the principal left, then she stops it. Okay, stop the discussion, time out. Let me tell you why I did this. And all of a sudden the kids were full of repentance and they apologized and they were, so hard on themselves and everything. So basically what we watched was an unsuccessful teacher experiment ploy, right? So we can only find that out by asking Becky, right? So now what's our leverage point? So we had a different one in mind, but now that we've heard from Becky, something we didn't know, couldn't have known, now we got to decide, okay, so what's our coaching point? So let's think this through. Well, should we criticize her for departing from the curriculum? Should we praise her for doing something pretty brave? Should we praise her about her students' skills, which we already did in the first quadrant there? So that's a decision for the administrator. And then the last one is an actionable next step. So what's a next step for you based upon this experience and what we talked about? So that's the sequence. Praise, listen to the teacher, open the door for the teacher to give context, decide on a leverage point. We don't have to have a criticism, but usually there's a suggestion and then an actionable next step. And then at the end, ask the teacher, what's your big takeaway, from our conversation? So that's the protocol that I'm recommending. So
Kim,
then,
really
yeah,
briefly,
yeah,
really
go
briefly, if
ahead.
you go back a slide, I mean, I just want to say one thing that I really appreciate about this framework. I mean, when we have conversations with teachers, they use the word that you mentioned earlier, which is gotcha.
Yeah,
Send a next step in an email. You never get that top right corner, which is the
yeah,
opportunity for the teacher to have a say in what the next step is,
right,
because you've actually surfaced more information. And there's
right.
something about this approach which encourages the instructional leader to express such humility
Mm-hmm.
and engagement with the teacher that makes it true support.
Right.
And it just is so evident that it
Yeah.
can't happen unless you talk.
Well, it's respectful, and again, most teachers from a union point would insist on this, and yet it isn't like a union demand, that happens very often.
Right.
So this is a kind of uncommon type of approach. Many principals have done versions of this over the years because people tend to stumble upon and discover good techniques, but this is not the usual way of doing things, and I'm out there
Mm.
sort of recommending this. So then the question is, okay, so what do we do next? Well, my protocol up to now has been, actually go backwards. I'm sorry. For 9 years that I was a principal, that I did many observations, I only gave face-to-face feedback. I didn't do a brief write-up. But then this woman, Alex Estrella, when she was a New York City principal, middle school principal in Spanish Harlem, I was coaching her, and she was very good at many observations. She always did the face-to-face conversation. She had a sort of nice, tough love way about her. But then she started to do something that I hadn't recommended, which was to write a short summary to the teacher that was confidential. So it would not be Freedom of Information Act. It would not be something that someone could get a hold of. It's private between the principal and the teacher. And she convinced me that there were two important reasons for some kind of documentation. First of all, to reinforce it with the teacher because they have it in writing. Secondly, to legitimize with her boss because her boss, the District 4 superintendent in New York, was quite skeptical about many observations. Where's the beef? And she was able to show the principal, a paper trail with each teacher. So that was convinced her boss at that point. But the danger is this is time for the principal who is extraordinarily busy. And so, well, one idea for that is to keep it short. And the T of L software from Tennessee had this brilliant idea. Let's limit it to 1,000 characters or about 150 words. So that makes it shorter and more manageable, but it's still work to do this. Okay. So will people do this? And again, the whole pushback on many observations is I can't get out of my office. I don't have time to get into these classrooms. Or if I do get into classrooms, the teachers don't have time to talk to me. So how can we do this? How can we, get this done? But let's just talk about this idea of a short summary. Okay, so ideally, the principal gets in a groove, with this limit, of 150 words, gets in a groove, and it takes only 10 or 15 minutes to write these and send it electronically. So the teacher can respond, and so this is pretty efficient. Okay, so and you got to have it so when the teacher opens it, it's legal proof that it's been received and so forth. So we're going to skip this actually, but let me just give you a glance. This is actually, let me let you read this. So this is a hypothetical summary after the conversation with Becky. So I'll let you read this or skim it. So that's my I did this and I've never met Becky. So this is hypothetically based upon a conversation in which she revealed the truth. And it is true, this thing about the substitute teacher and everything. So that's this can be done. And a lot of people are doing this. Some districts, have limited to 1,000 characters and there's something in writing sent to the teacher afterward. And let's look at time. Let's get very concrete here. So on Monday, the blue bar here is a mini observation. So on middle of third period and middle of fifth period, this teacher did too many observations. The red bars are the face-to-face conversations. So each of these is taking about 10 minutes. Okay. So you can look at Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. You can see they're basically doing 2 or 3 mini observations or conversations every day. And there's a lot of white space. There's time to do all the other stuff a principal does. And then these green bars down here in the late afternoon or evening or early in the morning are the write-ups or these brief write-ups. Again, taking 10 or 15 minutes. So looking at it here, so total of 60 minutes on Monday, total of 70 minutes on Tuesday, 70 minutes on Wednesday, etc. So this looks manageable. Okay, so we can do this. We can do these many observations, a couple a day, which is, by the way, the average, for a principal to get to 10 by the end of the year. And so this is doable. Okay, and I'm thinking I've been, talking about this for a number of years and recommending this. But what if we used artificial intelligence to summarize the conversation? So this is where Will comes in. This is where his company, Swiftscore, comes in. They have developed an AI tool which allows a principal and a teacher to sit and talk about and have that conversation about the mini observation, going through the four quadrants, okay, the praise, opening of the teacher, etc., and then having it do a summary of the conversation. And I've been working with this. I did five of these yesterday in this school in New Jersey. I did one, in Bedford-Stuyvesant in New York the day before, and I've done several others over the last few months. And this has some strong advantages. First of all, you're co-creating the summary with the teacher. Okay, so it isn't a question of the principal sending something to the teacher afterward. You're actually creating it in real time. There's mutual buy-in because you can edit it, right in real time. And of course, it saves the teacher those green bars at the bottom in the evening and the afternoon and the morning, whenever they're finding the time to do these brief write-ups, which some principals find pretty difficult. So I have to report, and I'm not paid by Swiftscore, by the way. I'm a thought partner and unpaid advisor to this young company. I have to report that this works. And so the whole big question here is when to use technology and when not to use it. So I believe for unit and lesson planning, Google Docs is a brilliant invention, and you should definitely use technology there. But for observing a lesson, I'm for bringing in a notepad. Keep it low tech, okay? For the immediate feedback to the teacher, the conversation with the teacher, that's low tech. But what about high tech for the documentation? Now, I have an example. I did a simulated conversation with Becky where I played Becky and someone else played the principal, and we did this conversation summarizer, and I have an actual write up, that an actual summary that this conversation summarizer did in 15 seconds. So I want to show it to you now. So here's Becky. Remember what we just saw. Okay, and here is the actual artificial intelligence summary of it was about a 15-minute conversation that I had. It was simulated, of course, but it was real. The person did a really good job. They were the principal. I was Becky because I knew the backstory. So I came up with this surprising information about the substitute, the bullying, etc. So let's take a look at it. Actually, can we have a volunteer? We actually will. Do you want to just read it out loud here?
For sure. Summary of discussion. Becky, it was a pleasure observing your classroom. The respectful environment you've cultivated is truly impressive, especially how students listen attentively without interrupting. As we discussed, the lesson followed a substitute day where the student behavior wasn't ideal, adding an unexpected layer to the lesson's context. Our conversation centered on maximizing student participation. You insightfully recognized the need to involve more students, and we explored strategies like a four-person rule to encourage broader engagement. We also discussed extending the lesson's themes of prejudice and bullying to real-world connections and potential collaborative activities with another class. There were also some discussion of some of the language used by students and strategies to address it. It's inspiring to see your reflective approach and willingness to explore teachable moments, even from unplanned situations. Your openness to feedback and commitment to continuous improvement is commendable. I'm excited to see how you build on this experience and continue to foster a dynamic learning environment.
So that is what AI came up with. And it's different from the one you just saw, the one that I wrote, and it's really good. So again, I did five of these yesterday, from kindergarten to seventh grade in this large school in New Jersey. And every single case, I sat with a teacher. The teacher, was freed up after the observation. The teacher came in. I did the feedback conversation. I was, the observer. And at the end, it was transcribing everything. And at the end, we pushed the button, and in about 15 seconds, a little spinning, it came up with a summary of each one. In every case, I had the teacher read it out loud, and there were other administrators in the room. And every person in the room in all five cases agreed that is an accurate summary. The teachers were pleased. In some cases, there were critical points. In some cases, it was like this, fairly positive. So this is an amazing use of artificial intelligence. And I think this, in the overall context of a principal making the time to get into classrooms frequently, to do these many observations, to have the conversations with the teacher, and then have some kind of documentation of that, I think this is amazing. Now, the way it works is after the teacher has read the summary, they can make edits. And in one case yesterday, there was a slight edit, you just did it on the screen. And then both the principal, the supervisor, and the teacher sign, like on the screen, sign that they approve it. And it's then sent as an email to both people and then becomes part of the record. So just to wrap up, and I want to leave time for some questions here. The big picture of this is instead of doing a whole bunch of full lesson observations, at the end of the year, what you're doing, what the supervisor is doing is spreading out the time during the year. It's about the same amount of time, but it spreads it out, with many observations and conversations and summaries taking place throughout the year. I'm in favor of kind of a quick mid-year check-in with the rubric, and then at the end of the year doing the rubric. So this is the same amount of time, but used, I think, much more positively. It's very different, and I think, much, much more effective. But there is the question with principals, are you willing to do this work? Are you willing? It's the same amount of work, but are you willing to be much more active, throughout the year? And I believe that many observations are a keystone habit. A keystone habit is a change of procedure that's relatively straightforward, short, frequent visits instead of these long ones, that has a disproportionate impact. And so here's the impact that I think many observations have. First of all, it improves teaching because you're in classrooms more frequently. You know what's going on. You get early warning. You're coaching teachers and they're coaching you. You build relationships. You get to know kids much better by seeing them constantly in classrooms. You have empathy for teachers who have a tough class or are wrestling with kids who have difficulties. And I saw one of those yesterday. Fair and accurate evaluations at the end of the year. You build teamwork. You get teachers reflecting. You compare the micro of one lesson, one mini lesson with the big work of the year, and it informs your professional development, of course, because you're sort of like a bumblebee spreading good practices, cross-pollinating, and then you walk the talk here in classrooms. You keep good teachers because the word is out about how good this is, to be in this kind of school, and you impress your stakeholders. So this is a powerful, low-cost way of working. So let me unshare my screen here, and we have good 5 minutes here for questions, comments, thoughts from our group.
Hey,
I can take
Will.
the first.
Oh, did you see that
Yeah.
first one?
Yeah. Is that what you're going to say, Corey?
Yeah, it was.
Okay. Amazing. Question is, what are the guardrails for privacy that are part of the tool that make it different than just using any other AI tool that you can record and summarize?
Well, I should have said that, and thank you very much for prompting me. So for this software is all private. Okay, so it is totally enclosed within the system. So the problem with using like ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini is it's all going up into the internet, all this private information. So that is not the case. So I should have mentioned that, and thank you very much for prompting me. No, it's all private. Other questions,
Exactly.
comments, thoughts?
While we wait for those to trickle in, I want to mention one thing really briefly,
Oh, by
which
the way,
is
do people know how to
hit
make
me.
how to get in? So what do they click at the bottom of their screen?
There's a QA button right at the bottom next to,
Oh, Q.
yeah,
Okay,
if you
so
click the
click
QA
on
button.
that, and then you can type in your question or comment.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
Let me just add too, while people are thinking, a couple people asked for the slides and some of the information. When we send out the recording tomorrow, we'll send the slides, a link to the slides with it as well. So you'll have that information. I know a couple people wanted those 10 prompts as an example. We'll make sure that you get that.
Yeah, that's one of the slides. Yeah, they'll be there. Okay, great.
So I've now had the pleasure of kind of sitting in on many of your presentations, Kim, and they always captivate the audience. And one of the things they're often asking at the end is, okay, so what do we do now? How do we make this happen? Right? I want to give two ways that folks can engage today. First is the conversation summary is free. If you scan this link here, we'll hop on a call, quick call. We'll get you set up and you could use it that day. Could be used for doing these mini observations. And as Kim says, like teachers tend to actually be really receptive to it being used. We'll walk you through how to use it free of charge. The second is, Kim, we got coffee, what, like 2 weeks ago? And we had this question of, Kim does these amazing presentations. And then Monday happens and you're stuck with your evaluation system you've had for a while. It turns out change is like incredibly hard to do.
Hmm.
Um, I'm probably not the first to say that. We're putting together a cohort. If you are a district in Massachusetts specifically, and the things that Kim has said have really excited you, and you want others on your team to see that, and you are open to investing in this work, right? Like this is not going to be easy or simple. But at the end of May, we're bringing together 10 districts in Massachusetts. Kim's going to give a 3-hour PD session. It's going to be very interactive. Going to use the conversation summary live. Kim's going to talk about how to actually enact a lot of these or implement a lot of these systems that he's talking towards and the responsible, non-responsible ways of using AI. We're inviting from a given district, the principal representative, a district representative, and a teacher representative as well. And so it's going to be a sort of like a mini conference for the folks in Massachusetts. We currently got 7 spots left. If you're interested in hearing a little bit more about that too, you can also scan this code and we'll hop on a call and talk through if that's something you want to engage in.
Well, we're kind of out of time, but I'm sure just one more thought. There's obviously union issues involved in this. Short, frequent observations is something unions would want to hear the details about. And so this does involve probably in a public school negotiating with the union, convincing, but I'm a lot of experience convincing union folks. And usually once people understand the details of it, they say, wow, I would really appreciate it and actually prefer this to the traditional system. Principals certainly prefer it, but there's a lot to it. The devil's in the details. It can be messed up in numerous ways, but I'm happy to answer questions about this. And you can also go to the Marshall Memo website, and all of my writing about this is available on the website for free. So you can check out some of that.
Great. Well, Will, Kim, I just want to thank you guys again for your time. Everyone who came to today's call, I want to thank you for your time. I hope you found, as we said at the outset, this useful and insightful in the work that you are doing. At Rocket PD, we have just been really on a mission not only to talk about some of the challenges that we're experiencing in schools, but to surface solutions that can help. And we've been on this journey, Kim, as we said, for about 5 years now with you in the Rethinking Teacher Supervision and Evaluation cohort. And we think this is perhaps just another evolution of some of that thinking. So I want to thank everybody today for being here. We will send out an email with the recording as well as the slides and perhaps some additional information. When you get that, you'll also be able to access the link to get the conversation summarizer in the event that you weren't able to scan the code today. So thank you all for your time. Kim, I hope we can do this again real soon. Will, thanks again. I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank
Thanks,
all
Corey.
of you.
You
Yeah, be
got it.
well.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Happy Friday.